Oftentimes, employees think that they can sue their employer because their workplace is stressful or overwhelming. But that's a common misconception because many people feel stressed at work. That's ordinary. But if you're feeling stressed at work because you're being harassed or threatened with violence, then that's different. That's actionable. And you may be able to recover if you pursue a claim against an employer. It's important to understand the legal standards involved in pursuing a claim for emotional distress because it may not be actionable. Feeling stressed out at work might not be actionable, but being targeted and emotionally abused at work, that might be actionable. Emotional distress from a legal standpoint means that the employee is emotionally suffering. Usually what that looks like is anxiety, depression, eating disorders, sleepless nights. It could be exacerbating, worsening their medical condition, their disability, and it's creating this trauma, a PTSD-like response from the employee because of what they're experiencing at work. I often talk to employees who are suffering from anxiety, depression, sleepless nights, eating disorders, all because of what they're experiencing at work. Hostile work environment, discrimination, harassment, all of those types of workplaces may result in an employee suffering from emotional distress. Workplace behavior that could potentially cross the line to enable an employee to make a claim for emotional distress is typically harassment or discrimination or hostile work environment, to the point of that employee having an emotional mental breakdown. That may lead to an emotional distress claim. Examples of a workplace that can cause an employee to suffer from emotional distress are work environments that are hostile or unsafe, and the employee is suffering from workplace trauma because of their employer. It's not just discrimination and harassment that result in an employee claiming emotional distress. It could be that an employee is overworked, undervalued, sexually harassed, maybe subjected to wage and hour violations where they're not being paid properly and they can't even feed their family. That's going to create an emotional response, an emotional trauma, because our livelihood is connected to our work. And if our work is in a healthy place, an employee might suffer from emotional distress. Ongoing harassment and bullying can contribute to emotional distress. That constant conduct, berating, making fun of, bullying, mobbing, isolating, excluding, all of those actions can result in an employee suffering from emotional distress, emotional trauma because of what they're experiencing on a daily basis at work. Repeated treatment over time can contribute to emotional distress. If the employee is being continuously subjected to hostile, degrading, accusatory, offensive dialogue on a daily basis, over time, that employee is going to be affected. They're going to feel an emotional response, and that could create a claim for emotional distress resulting from the workplace. Feeling stressed at work may not be enough to sue an employer, but if you are feeling stressed to the point of not being able to perform your job duties, or it's interfering with your work life and daily life, your engagement with your friends or family, if it's affecting you in your everyday life and debilitating your ability to both work or socialize, then that stress could be enough to state a claim for emotional distress. An employer can be held responsible for emotional distress in the workplace if it's associated with a claim for discrimination, harassment, credible threat of violence, hostile working conditions, unsafe, unhealthy working conditions. Those can all lead to liability for emotional distress claims as well. It doesn't matter whether the conduct came from a supervisor or a coworker, depending on the fact pattern, depending on the allegations. An employer can still be liable for a coworker causing emotional distress on another employee through harassment, credible threat of violence, hostile working conditions. But significant liability does result when it's supervisor or the manager. There's strict liability when it's a supervisor or a manager when we're talking about emotional trauma on an employee. They're held to a higher standard. If an employee reports that they are suffering from emotional distress, anxiety, depression, whatever it may be, to the employer has an obligation to now possibly engage that employee in an interactive process. The employee now came forward and reported that they are suffering mentally. They may have a medical condition because of what's going on in the workplace. That triggers a mandatory obligation for the employer to take action, to maybe engage in an interactive process, see if this employee needs reasonable accommodation, or it could be a workers' comp claim. If they're suffering from a work-related injury, including emotional distress because of work, then the employer should provide medical treatment, medical care, an outlet for them to get treatment or help because it is work-related. A common misconception about emotional distress claim against an employer is that you can just claim you're stressed out, that you can claim that you're suffering from this condition, but it really does have to be supported by medical documentation. You do need a medical provider to say that you're experiencing these symptoms because of work. There has to be a link. It's not just simply, I'm so stressed out, my job is hard. It's, I am having an emotional breakdown. I am suffering from anxiety, depression, PTSD because of work. It's easy to say that you're feeling stressed out at work. But if you have documentation to prove, to show, to substantiate that you are suffering from real symptoms associated with emotional distress, it's key to proving your claim. So you do need medical documentation. You need a diagnosis. You need someone to validate what you're experiencing and explain it, because it's a medical provider's job to diagnose you with a mental disability or a medical condition, which is related to emotional distress. But you need that first in order to make a claim. Evidence that would support an emotional distress claim include therapy notes, doctor's visits, something from a medical provider to show that you are experiencing this emotional, mental response because of what you're experiencing at work. It's important to seek medical attention for emotional distress, and that does help prove your claim. So therapy notes, doctor's visits, notes, but that helps prove your claim. It's very important for employees to document what they're experiencing at work, especially when an employee is complaining of emotional distress. The best way to show what you're experiencing is by writing it down, documenting your story, and then also taking that to a medical provider so that the medical provider can assess you, help you, and create notes on what you're actually experiencing in real time. If an employee feels that an employer's conduct is causing emotional distress, they should go to the doctor. They should seek medical treatment, talk to a therapist, and get help for those symptoms that are associated with the emotional distress and trauma. Start there and then report it to the employer. Talk to your employer about what you're feeling, what symptoms you're feeling. If you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed out or anxiety or depression, go talk to your employer about that and see what they do. See if they can help you. If an employee is feeling like they're a victim of emotional distress or trauma in the workplace, they should report it to HR or management, but they should also go seek treatment. If an employee is suffering from emotional distress that's directly associated or caused by the workplace, they should talk to an attorney about this because it could be a workers' comp claim. If your emotional distress is related, it's a work-related injury, then you may have a workers' compensation claim. And if it goes beyond that, if it's a result of discrimination or harassment or threats of violence in the workplace, then it may be a civil claim. And so it's important to talk to a lawyer about what your rights are and how you can protect yourself. An employment attorney can determine whether the emotional distress is a workers' compensation claim or a civil claim. So it's looking at the fact pattern and determining where the emotional distress is stemming from, what sort of conduct is occurring in the workplace, and whether they can pursue these claims legally in the civil realm under discrimination, harassment, or credible threats of violence, or if it's a workers' compensation claim and they really just need medical treatment, medical care, and they can get that if it's related to their work. A consultation with an employment law attorney regarding emotional distress will help the employee understand that they have rights. And then the lawyer is going to look at the fact pattern. The lawyer is going to determine whether or not this is actionable. So it's really case specific, story specific. It's looking at what happened, what the employee is feeling, what the employee experienced, and then evaluating whether there's claims here. If employees are feeling emotionally overwhelmed at work, there are outlets. There's medical treatment, there's options for them to explore. I don't think any employee should go to work and feel traumatized and emotionally drained and distraught. Now, work can be stressful, but you should go to work feeling safe and joyful. And so if you are feeling like your work is emotionally destroying you, then you should talk to somebody, whether it's a medical provider or a lawyer or a friend or family. Talk to somebody so you can get advice on what to do next. If your employer's conduct has seriously harmed your mental health, you should go talk to a medical provider and you should really consider your options. You should get out. You should find an alternative option or job because nothing's more important than your mental health. Your job is not worth destroying your mental health. It's not worth it.